Hello and welcome to the Alpha Software Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products here at Alpha Software, and I am pleased to be joined today by Greg Boulding, VP of Sales, Services, and Success here at Alpha. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about Alpha Transform. Alpha Transform, as you know, is a companion product to Alpha Anywhere. It's a two-piece product. It comes with a mobile app, which you can download from the Google Play Store or from the Apple App Store. And there is a web backend, which we call Transform Central, which you can find at transform.alphasoftware.com. Now, it was designed originally as a forms product. So in other words, entering in data, especially in like in a field service situation, but it's evolved into much more than that, to the point where you can actually build out really mini applications and multiple mini applications that can run right on mobile devices. We find that it's most used for people who are in field services or manufacturing quality, but it's also used in other places, used in social services and things like that. Really, anytime people used to have a clipboard or something like that, they would instead now use Alpha Transform because they get a lot more benefits. It has things like error checking. You don't have paperwork that gets lost. It can do calculations, and it can also kick off workflows. And part of that workflow we're going to talk about a little bit later on today. So the reason we're talking about Transform today is because we have a new version that is coming out. We are now have a public Transform version 8 beta, which is going to come to a close, we think, very soon. So I suspect by the end of the week, this will become the official version. Now, there are two big features in this. One is a feature called field rendering, which Greg is going to talk about, and he's got some cool examples to show you. The other one is called Transform QuickLink, and that's one that I want to tell you about, and I'm going to jump into that right now. Of course, we're here also to answer questions. You could type questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. You can also send your questions to guides, GUIDES, at alphasoftware.com. Okay, so let's get started here. Let me see, it looks like there might be some questions. Yes, there is a repeat question. Let's see if we can get to that one today. All right, so here we are at the, this is the letter that went out. So if you are basically a paid license holder of Alpha Transform, you would have gotten this last week where we talked about our two new features. The one I want to talk about in particular, QuickLink, is it's kind of a cool feature. Now, when I was choosing this slide today, I let Microsoft PowerPoint suggest an image. I have no idea how it said QuickLink, and it said, wow, this seems like a link or something. but it actually is a really, really good graphic because it kind of shows something standing out. And that's really what QuickLink is about here. So let me give you an example. Let's imagine our person is out on the field. Out in the field.
Hey, Dave, real quick.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing anything other than the Alpha Software slide.
Oh, no, that's terrible. Right.
We're not seeing what you're talking about yet, or
I think that's probably it. Hang on a second. I think that's a technical error on my side. Hang on a second. And I'm going to show my screen again.
There you go.
Oh, did it change? All right, cool.
Yeah.
So this is the letter. You didn't miss much. This is that graphic I was telling you about of this person jumping up and down. Transform QuickLink. So let's go back to our, imagine we have our field service person now. We'll call Jesse the field service person. Now, Jesse's job, you can imagine that this isn't a clipboard, but a Transform application, is to take a look and make sure everything is functioning, make sure it looks safe and things like that, and then report back your findings. Now, let's say Jesse opens up the box and it looks like this. Now, it isn't quite on fire. If we're on fire, Jesse would be allowed to shut off this box and make repairs, but he knows this needs to be fixed right away. So he's going to fill in a form, basically trying to get permission to, or alerting someone that this box needs to be fixed right away. And to do that, their boss will then take a look at it, take a look at the picture and say, oh yeah, that needs to be addressed. We'll send them back permission and they can get started. So today, if you were going to do something like that, let me show you what the flow might be. It would be like this. So Jesse has filled out a form. The form is automatically shown that there was a problem, and it kicked off an SMS to Jesse's boss. And Jesse's boss gets the message and opens it up and says, oh, there's a problem. I need to go to Transform. So the next thing they do is they sit down in front of their computer or they open up their mobile phone and they go to the Transform Central. And then they log in if they need to, if their login hasn't expired. Remember, it stays good for a couple of days. And then they choose the correct account to log into because they might have a couple different accounts. And then they'll go and take a look for the form. There might be they might have hundreds or thousands of forms. Hopefully the one they want is listed up at the top. There are ways of managing that. So let's say they go find the form, then they go find that part of the form that needs attention. Maybe they just need a signature to indicate to Jesse, yes, go ahead and fix this box, clean it up. And then the form is submitted and the process is complete. And that's the workflow that we have today. But using quick links, we can do something a little bit more clever. With a QuickLink workflow, when a message is sent, that SMS message can contain a quick link in it. And clicking that link in either the SMS or the email will automatically open up a web page. And it will prompt them for a login as necessary. Again, they may not need to log in. You only need to log in every couple of days. And when they log in, or when they click the link, they'll be brought directly to the correct account. They'll be brought directly to the correct form, and they'll be brought directly to the correct place in that form to do their work, and then they can submit it. So they've skipped an awful lot of steps of opening emails, opening applications, looking through lists of forms, choosing the right form, and going to the right part. And so all of that is handled using a quick link. So why is it called a quick link? Well, the quick probably seems obvious because it takes you right to where you want to be. But it's a quick link because it's done by creating a particular URL. And we have documentation for that here, which I'm going to just show you real quick. And hang on a second. Okay. Just opening that link now. And actually, while I've got that link, I'm going to go ahead and paste that into the chat window so that you have the link also. There we go. So let's go back into Safari. Up and show my screen again. All right, so this is the new documentation that's now available on the quick link function. And basically it shows you create a quick link by basically starting out with a URL like that and then adding some parameters to the query string. Now, one of the parameters you can add is which particular form instance you would like the person to fill out. And when you do that, you could say, I'd like them to fill out that form instance or make modifications to it, or I want the system to automatically duplicate that form and let them fill in a copy of the form instead. That might make sense, for example, if you've got one that you have set up as a template, but every time you send one out, you want someone to fill out a fresh copy. It also works with our queuing system, which, so if you recall, forms don't have to be assigned to a specific person. They can instead be assigned to a queue, and members of those queues can go in and pick up the forms, claim the forms, fill them out, and then submit them. There's also the ability to go directly to a particular area in that form using the target parameter, and that goes along with the go to command, which you may have seen before. And you can also pre-fill some data just by using the URI encoding as well. And there are other features. So it's actually really quite a cool feature, worth checking out, playing around with the links and seeing what you come up with. So that's just one of the features that I wanted to talk about today. But the other one I wanted to talk about was with field rendering. And for that, I have Greg Bowling here on the line. Hello, Greg, are you there?
I am. Oh.
Excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and make you the presenter. If I can find you. Here you go. Make presenter. And you should see a dialog box on your screen asking if you'd like to share your screen.
And I'll just figure out which screen is which. Okay.
All right. And I'm looking at a PowerPoint.
Yes. Okay. All right. Let's do this. Yeah, so like Dave mentioned, One of the other big new features that we've got coming in this release is what are called render functions, because they're fun. And this lets you control how your fields get displayed in the filler and other areas. So what is it? Like I said, you have control over now how your fields are displayed. Your fields get rendered in various places. So you have your filler, either the web or the mobile one, but also in Management Console, when you're looking at the forms, there's a form view, there's a on submit events that can generate PDFs and things that render your forms. And in the designer, there's the preview window. So all of these places basically take the JSON that represents your form and turns it into something visual. And now we have, we have ability to control that ourselves instead of just accepting the defaults. So you can only imagine why I'm the one that is doing this presentation. So, so we have a list of supported field types for now. Text and the number ones and date things and lists and button lists and things. So those are the ones that will accept the formatting. Some of them aren't on there yet. Some of them don't make sense at this point of like, what really would you do to reformat, like the GPS location field or something. But always opportunity for us to think about that and maybe add it later. So how do we set this up? There's a new property in the designer on a field called formatting. And so when you tap on that, you get a list of functions that are basically in your form definition that you can choose to apply to that particular field. You also can see this in the code editor on the properties of a field there as well. So it's a TPL function. That function is going to get called. It's going to get whatever the value in the field is, as well as some information about the field itself. And then it's your responsibility to return what you want to come back out. So the way you set these up is there's sort of a special syntax. Excuse me. You declare your function, and then in a comment on the first line, when you put this, hash bang render colon, this actually tells you what's going to show up in this list, right? And you can still put comments in here, right? So everything, so this is a comment, blah, 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 and then this is the part I want to show up here. So that's basically what you do to declare something as a formatting function, and then you'll be able to set them on your fields. So the very basics, like we said, you get, as the first argument to your function, you're going to get whatever the value of the field currently is as text. And then you're responsible for returning what you want to come back out. So first example is a no operation, do nothing function. We get the value, we just spit out the same value. It won't look any different there. So that's boring, but it shows you kind of the very basics. And you can see here, I've, set this as a render function so that I can use it. So since this does come as text, you can then manipulate that text. So in this example, we want to take a number. If it's a number, we're going to use format number function, and we'll put thousands separator into my number. And then I do have an example of that, which we can flip over to my filler. So here's two fields. They're the same column, the same field name. So no matter which one I fill out, it's going to affect both. But this one has a formatting function applied, and this one does not. So that was on these examples. So if we enter a number in here, and one of the features that is coming is numeric keypad support in the web filler. So I can put a bunch of numbers in here and submit it. And you'll see the unformatted 526585, but the formatted one now has turned that into one with a column separator. So in the underlying data, it's still just this string, but when we see it here in the filler, it shows up with a comma separator. So a really basic way of working with the text of it. So in addition to text, you can actually now return HTML in your function. And to do that, instead of returning that text value, you have to return an object that has a type attribute set to HTML. And then that object has an HTML attribute where you put whatever your HTML is. So here we get the original value, we create our object, we stick the original value in there just in case something explodes or it's not a number or whatever. So we'll just come back out the way it came in. So we say, oh, if it is a number, we're going to default to black as our color, but now we're going to format it as currency, or we want, comma to separator and 2 decimal places. Now we're going to check, is our value negative? Then I want my color to be red, and let's put parentheses around the value. And so then we're going to actually spit out HTML that sets a color style to whatever color we picked, and then puts our value in here and inside this little, well, I did the code wrong, but it should be a closing span here instead of a div, but I think that it still works wherever I put it. So if we flip over to the example, here we have a currency field. So if I type, like negative $55 or $5 or whatever this is, right? You can see that I have my negative value is red with a $sign around it and parentheses. And if I change that instead to something positive, then I'm black with a $sign, no parentheses, etc. So this starts to let you give some visual indication when somebody enters a value in as to, is it within parameters? Is it good, medium, bad, things like that. So that is that one. And going on, then we can also include SVG in our output, in our HTML output. So in this case, and I make helper functions that I'm not going to show on here, but I put all my SVG into a separate function so I can just spit it out where I need it. So here we've got we're going to check the value, and we're going to look to see if it says down, left, up, or right, and we're going to set a rotation value. And then if it's not one of those, then it's an arrow. Then it's going to be just a bar, straight bar. Then we're going to make some SVG out of this. So we're going to grab, and if it's an arrow, we're going to go pick whatever rotation function that I made. It's going to draw an arrow that points whatever direction you ask, and we'll make it blue. And if it's none of these, it's a bar. We're just going to make a straight bar, close out all our tags and things, and then return that HTML, add that HTML to the new value, return it. So when we do that, that gives us this list that I applied it to. So I can pick down, and it will give me a down arrow. And I can pick left, and I can have a left arrow next to it. If I pick something that isn't one of the arrows, like middle, I get my bar. So that lets us use essentially SVG within these formatting functions as well. So that is that one. Let's go now. Button lists. So a button list, when we do a render function here, we actually get the value plus an object that has a bunch of properties for those button lists. And when we return value for this, needs to be a special object. It's a type BL data, which is for button list data. It's going to have a BL data attribute. That's going to have a buttons attribute that's an array of all my button HTML and other properties that I'm not showing here. And there's some other properties to this object that we're going to skip for now. So essentially what we do is to render our button list, we make HTML of some sort for each button we want to show, and then add that to this array, and then it will display it however we want, which means we can make our own buttons. So in this example, we're going to do satisfaction. So this is like, you know, am I happy, neutral, or unhappy about this? In the underlying transform data, it's a comma separated list of values. So in this case, if you have that multi-select turned on your list, then you would get a comma separated string here. So what we're just doing here, we get the value. Here we get, you know, properties of the button list. We're going to make this object that we need and put a buttons array in it. We're going to create our final value that we spit out. It's an object of type BL data. It has a BL data attribute that is this object that we just created. I make some arrays to help me do what we need to do. You know, if it was multi-select, we're going to get a comma separated. So maybe I make an array out of that. You can see these button options have things like the list of buttons, which is an array. We can go check to see if a button is selected. And then eventually we'll make a new button HTML SVG, create that button, push it onto that array, join everything up and spit it out. So it's a lot of, I think, to digest. It's probably easier to just see the example. So my SVG is smiley face, you know, neutral face, frowny face. If we click on it, you know, you can see this is the value that's getting set for the button. Depending on whether this is the selected one, we're rendering these in different colors, but it lets us do buttons that, you know, can have visual graphics instead of just the default buttons that we used to get. The other thing I'll point out here is one of those extra things is header, right? So what we can do is display headers and footers and things. So in this case, there's a header that shows the actual value of the name of the button in my form definition. The underlying value could be different, but I get that from the display values, which I am grabbing here. So and that just lets you essentially replace a button with something else, right? But it all works the same. We also now have what I call a handler function for button lists. In the actual, this is the properties in the code editor. I think the field is labeled render button, but I think of them as handlers. So basically there's a function that you can add that will do the processing when you tap on the button. Instead of the default, which is which button did I tap on, that's the value I want to add to my list, right? So what we get in this function is the field value and another object that has a bunch of button list properties to it. So in this example, our button, we have 3 buttons really, 0, 1, and 2. That's all we want to be able to do, but we only want to show one button. And we want to show the name of the button when you tap on it, and we want to change the color, and we just want it to cycle through the options in one place. And I think I have this one working right now. So in this case, you know, first button, but if I tap it, I've moved to second. If I tap it, third, tap it, I'm back to first. So there's a handler function in here, which I think I'm showing down here. Basically, I get that value, and I need to, this is, you know, I have to do something with it. So I'm just incrementing the value, and then if it's, you know, greater than 2, I go back to 0. And that says, what's the value of my field? I have 0, 1, and 2 in the form definition for my values. And so the render function looks at that and says, okay, if it's 0, then show, you know, a red button, which I do here with an array. You know, I just say grab the color based on the number that's in the value, because I'm lazy and I do things like that. And then pull the label from the, you know, definition as well. And I can show some of that too, how that's put together. But that lets you do that. And I'm really trying to get through all of this quickly so we have time for any questions or anything. So last example then, you get in that properties object that comes, as the second argument to your handler, the X and Y coordinates of where the button got tapped. And so you can use that to actually do a calculation and derive based on where somebody taps on a button. And so if we go to the example, my button list is this. Here's my renders is this one button, and my handler determines where I tap, which square should be filled in. If I tap on it again, it'll unselect it. And just as a proof of concept, if you tap up here, it doesn't do anything. But if you tap down here, it'll select the whole row or unselect the whole row based on, and then these are the values. So you can pick your seed assignment, maybe, is kind of the concept here. There's a lot going on in this code. But essentially what we're doing is when I tap, I get an XY coordinate based on wherever I've clicked. I have a 300 by 300 grid that this SVG represents. So I know if we're, if X is 51 and Y is 51, I know I'm here. So that's called, a cell A1. And then I can, basically decide and you manipulate what the resulting output is based on a bunch of arrays and things that we're calculating. And here I know I'm not in one of these 5, but I know I'm in the D row. So I can check and see, do I need to fill them all in or do I need to clear them all out based on the status of those cells in my, in this list. So, and because these are the same field name and this one too, you can actually click here and have it show up over there as well, because the underlying, field is the same, has the same name, so it's really the same thing. So that's that one. And then just to kind of close everything up, just to mention some of the last bits of miscellany. There's 2 new TPL system variables that are coming to tell you where things are actually running. So there's a render mode and a render app. So my example up here is just add to the front of my, whatever the value is, a string that says here's where we're rendering and what app. So this will say like filler, and it'll say web filler, or it'll say management console, or so you can use this in your function to say, well, if I'm outputting the PDF report of this, I want it to show this way, but if I'm in the filler or I'm in the web filler versus the mobile filler, I want it to show differently because I happen to know, when it's printed, I want it to look a certain way, but if I'm in the app, I maybe want to do something different. So those 2 will tell you that. There is an extra settings property in the code editor where you can basically put whatever you want, and your functions can reference it. There's basically in that second argument, there's a settings.extra. And so if you put JSON in here, you could, string to JSON it into an object and do something. You can make that comment as limited text and parse it, whatever you want. It's basically just however you want to do it. There are settings for button lists for headers and footers. And you do have some control over the container style, which is the whole thing that represents the button list. The buttons themselves have before and after attributes. So in this case, you could put characters or HTML between the buttons, line feeds. You have some control over button style too, if you don't want to completely generate your own and just tweak the style that comes out. There is a log console function that's been added, which I had to use today to figure out what was going on with that grid. And because it's very hard, you can't really use the normal debugger for render functions because they spit out HTML and stuff, and it's hard to debug what the heck's going on. So you can now log to the browser console and see, in my case, I was spitting out strings of what was in arrays that I was trying to manipulate to figure out how I screwed it up. So that is basically the whirlwind tour of kind of what this feature is. I think I've only scratched the surface of it with this, but I hope it kind of gave some ideas of what can be done within the forms.
So I love about render functions that it is a two-way function. For example, you can create like a grid and click on bits of the grid and have it set underlying data, or have it be the other way around and have data basically light up parts of the grid, which I thought was a pretty cool example. But you really could build any kind of control. It does look like you probably need to know a bit of JavaScript in the current implementation of these render functions.
Well, just TPL.
Or TPL, okay.
Yeah, just TPL. It's not, I mean, I do have, like.
Oh, okay.
So for the grid, for example.
You're right, it's just standard TPL, terrific.
Let me see if I can find the handler. That might be up here. Right, here's the render function itself.
Mm-hmm.
So like all button list ones, you're going to get the value, you're going to get your options, you're going to want to create, the BL data, which has that buttons array.
Right.
You're going to create your return object that's of type BL data and has BL data set to this object that we want. In this case, we're going to see how many are selected. I actually, what do we do? Oh, build an array of just empties so we can figure out which ones I need to turn on. Yep. My helper function basically takes this array of zeros and ones and decides whether it should be blue or green, based on which cells are ones. So that's what this gen grid does. But then it's a single button basically. So in the move this over a little bit. In normal Transform, you create this button list and you have a whole bunch of buttons. In this case, this is actually one button, which if you forget to put the handler function on, or you're working in the external data, it doesn't have the fix where the handler function would accidentally get cleared sometimes, which happened to me about an hour ago. This is treated as I clicked the first button. So no matter where you clicked on here, it would just set it to A1 and drive you crazy. But so the handler is what actually does the magic, because this is like, oh, I click button number 1, and there is actually a way to tell which button. If you made 3 buttons, your handler could say if it's button 2, like sometimes we'll do like a reset button that would clear it all out.
So say, how does it do that? Like if I'm clicking, if you're clicking, let's say A5, how does it know that 5 is the one in the row A that's being clicked on?
So what it does, and it's in this handler, is the first thing it does is we check, so we get the second argument, we're checking the X location, and if it's between 50 to 99, then it's this column 1, and if it's 100 to 149, I know I'm in this column 2. Gotcha. And so we just set a column, and then same for the row, we're looking at our Y values, we set to A to E, and then ignore that part because that's the thing that does the whole row. But otherwise, and I didn't do column because it just took forever to figure out how to do this. Otherwise, we just create a string A3, tap row plus tap column. We add it back to that array of what was selected already, and then we just do an array join to put it back into a comma delimited list
Yeah.
and return it. So when I tap on A5, it knows based on X and Y that I tapped on A5. And then we check to see if it's selected already or not. And if it is already, then we just unselect it. There's a thing where we remove it from the array.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if it's not, then we add it to the selected array. And then the whole column one basically just has to do a bunch of work to say, were all 5 of these already selected? Okay.
And what happens when it's just
whether I should add them back or take
curiosity, if you were to click A right now, would it turn off 3 and 4 and turn on 1, 2, and 5?
No, it'll turn on all. It'll turn them
on. Okay, I see.
Because what we actually do is we count to see how many were already selected.
Yeah.
If it's 5, then we just fill the whole. We just don't do anything.
Yep.
If it's less than 5, then we're just going to fill the whole row.
Perfect.
Basically, so that lets us do that. Fills the whole row. Unclick, undoes the whole thing. Whatever we wanted it to do.
Neat.
So this could be an image map. I know we've toyed around a little bit. If you think about
geography, we've done before.
Like a rental car agreement picture here, you can put in as part of your button, and you tap in the right place, and based on where you tapped, you would know that it was at the door and at the things like that, or maybe it's a gingerbread man shape or something, and where does my head hurts and my right arm hurts. There's a lot of things that you can do about that. Ultimately, it comes down to translating that into whatever data you really want to collect. Mm-hmm. In this case, I have a list of, if we think of these as like concert seats or something, I have a list of all the ones that were selected. Another thing that you could have done in something like this is there could be a third state where it's grayed out and you're not able to select it. You would just somehow have to have a way of feeding in the right data that says show a grid but gray out these certain seats, for example, and you can select from the others. That's sort of my little use case on that one. So.
Wow, very nice. So someone asked if you wouldn't mind sharing the form definition for this one.
Yep.
We can do that.
Certainly.
What we'll do is we'll probably put it up when we put up the YouTube video, so you'll be able to get them both at the same time.
Yeah.
Excellent. Let's see what else we've got here. Someone said, techie question, what does TPL compile down to? Is it under, so I think TPL basically JavaScript, exactly. So that's as far as it goes.
Because it's client. Well, yeah, because it's basically client.
It's supposed to write client side. Yeah, great, wonderful. Well, Greg, thank you very much. Thanks everyone who attended. Sure. We will be back next week talking about Alpha Anywhere. We've got some exciting new things that are in the release notes that I'd like to go over with you. And also I've collected a bunch of customer questions that I would love to show you what the answers were to them. In the meantime, if you do have questions, send them to guides, GUIDES @alphasoftware.com. Until then, take care. Hope to see you at our next webinar. Thanks. Bye-bye.